For more original stories, subscribe to Audio Tales. Now, let's begin this one. The silence of the house had become a physical presence, pressing in on me like a weighted blanket, heavy with unspoken truths. It wasn't the quiet of peace, but the deafening hush of a lie festering beneath the surface. For years, I had built my life around Sarah, a mosaic of shared laughter, whispered dreams, and the comforting rhythm of routine. Our home, a cozy bungalow nestled on a tree-lined street, was supposed to be our sanctuary, a testament to the love we nurtured. Now, it felt like a stage, and I, the unwitting audience, was about to witness the final, devastating act of a play I never knew I was in. It started subtly, as these things often do. A shift in her gaze, a fleeting coolness in her touch, an almost imperceptible distance that began to grow between us. Sarah, my vibrant, effervescent Sarah, seemed to dim, her light flickering as if caught in an unseen draft. I attributed it to stress, to the demanding nature of her new marketing role, to the general wear and tear of life. We all have our off days, don't we? I tried to reignite the spark, planned date nights, brought her flowers, whispered reassurances, into the night. She'd smile, a thin, almost practiced curve of her lips, and assure me everything was fine. But my gut, that primal instinct that usually served me well, screamed otherwise. The man, Daniel, entered our lives like a gust of fresh air, or so I thought at the time. I'd known Daniel since college, a good-hearted, if sometimes overly enthusiastic, friend from my debating club. He was charming, intelligent, and always made you feel like the most interesting person in the room. When his job transferred him to our city, I was genuinely thrilled. "You have to meet Sarah," I told him over a celebratory beer. "She's incredible." And so, with the best of intentions, I orchestrated their introduction. They hit it off, of course. Sarah, with her quick wit, and Daniel, with his infectious laugh, were a natural pairing in conversation. They bonded over shared interests in art house films and obscure jazz, things I'd always admired in Sarah but never quite grasped myself. I felt a pang of something then, not jealousy, not exactly, but a fleeting sense of being on the periphery, of a conversation I couldn't fully join. I brushed it off. It was good for Sarah to have friends, especially someone new in town. I encouraged their outings, their friendship, even felt a peculiar sense of pride that my two favorite people were getting along so well. What an idiot I was. The subtle shifts intensified. Late nights at work, sudden business trips, the increasing secrecy around her phone. The excuses grew thinner, more transparent, like a veil woven from cheap thread. One evening, after a particularly strained dinner where Sarah barely touched her food and kept glancing at her phone, I decided I couldn't live in this limbo anymore. The air was thick with unspoken accusations, and I was choking on them. "Sarah," I began, my voice surprisingly calm, despite the tremor in my hands. "What's going on?" She looked up, her eyes wide, almost panicked. "What do you mean, David?" "I mean us," I clarified, the words feeling heavy on my tongue. "You're distant. You're never here. And when you are, you're not here." A beat of silence stretched between us, taut and suffocating. Then she exhaled, a long, weary sigh that seemed to carry the weight of all our unspoken fears. I've been seeing someone, David." The words hit me with the force of a physical blow, knocking the air from my lungs. My vision blurred for a moment, the cozy living room tilting on its axis. I heard a ringing in my ears, a high-pitched whine that drowned out everything else. My mind, in a desperate attempt to protect itself, conjured images of strangers, faceless men from her office. Anyone but who? I managed to croak, the single word a raw, painful sound. She hesitated, her gaze dropping to her lap. Her hands, usually so expressive, were clasped tightly, knuckles white. It's Daniel." The world fractured. It wasn't just betrayal, it was a grotesque mockery, a cruel twist of fate engineered by my own naive hands. Daniel, my friend, the man I had brought into our home, into our lives, into her life. The irony was a bitter, metallic taste in my mouth. I felt a surge of nausea, a dizzying mix of disbelief and a raw, burning anger. Daniel? I repeated, the name a foreign, repulsive, a sound on my tongue. You're telling me you're with Daniel, the man I introduced you to? Her shoulders slumped. I'm so sorry, David. It just happened. We connected. I didn't mean for any of this. Her voice was soft, laced with a pity that only fueled my rage. I couldn't breathe. The walls seemed to close in, the air thick with the stench of betrayal. I remember standing up, my chair scraping loudly against the floor, a jarring sound in the sudden silence. I needed to escape, to run, to scream, but my feet were rooted to the spot, trapped in the quicksand of this horrifying revelation. How long? I asked, my voice a strangled whisper. A few months, she confessed, her eyes still downcast. It started, casually, then it grew. A few months. Months of lies, of secret meetings, of stolen moments while I, the fool, unsuspectingly shared meals with both of them, encouraging their friendship. The humiliation was a hot flush across my face. I felt exposed, vulnerable, as if my very skin had been peeled away, leaving my nerves raw and exposed. I stumbled out of the house that night, the cold night air a welcome slap to my face. I drove aimlessly for hours, the city lights blurring, into streaks of color, my mind a chaotic storm of anger, hurt, and a profound sense of loss. My wife, my friend, both gone, taken from me in the most insidious way imaginable. The next morning, after a sleepless night spent staring at the ceiling, I knew what I had to do. I couldn't just stew in my pain. I needed answers, a confrontation. Not just with Sarah, but with Daniel. I needed to look him in the eye and understand how he, a man I considered a friend, could do this to me. I called Daniel, my voice surprisingly steady. We need to talk, I said, no preamble. Now. He sounded hesitant, wary. David, just meet me at the old cafe near the park, I cut him off. 15 minutes. He agreed. I hung up, my hand trembling as I set the phone down. The pit in my stomach churned, a volatile mixture of fear and a desperate need for closure. When I arrived, Daniel was already there, hunched over a cup of coffee, his usually buoyant demeanor replaced by a rigid tenseness. He looked up as I approached, his eyes shadowed with guilt. David, he said, his voice low, almost a whisper. I'm so sorry. I know this is unforgivable. I pulled out a chair and sat opposite him, my gaze unwavering. Unforgivable? Daniel, you slept with my wife, the woman I introduced you to. What kind of man does that? He flinched, his shoulders hunching further. I know, there's no excuse. But it wasn't how you think. My blood ran cold. How I think? How else am I supposed to think, Daniel? You betrayed me. She betrayed me. It's a textbook affair. He shook his head, looking up, his eyes pleading. No, David, please, hear me out. It's complicated. More complicated than you realize. I scoffed, a bitter sound. Complicated? What could possibly be complicated about two people lying to a third? He took a deep breath, and then, slowly, he began to speak. His words came out in a rush, a torrent of confession that peeled back layers of deception I hadn't even begun to. Suspect. She told me you two were on the brink of divorce, he began, his voice raspy. That you were emotionally distant, that you barely spoke, that you'd been growing apart for years. She painted a picture of a marriage that was already over, a relationship held together by habit, not love. She said she was miserable, trapped, and that she felt guilty about not leaving you sooner. My mind reeled. Lies, more lies. Sarah had never once hinted at any of this to me. We had our disagreements, our rough patches like any couple, but on the brink of divorce? Miserable? Trapped? It was a fiction, intricately woven to ensnare Daniel. She came to me, David, he continued, his eyes meeting mine, filled with a raw, desperate honesty. She was vulnerable, seemingly heartbroken. She needed someone to listen, she said. And I listened. I felt terrible for her, for what she was going through. She said you were already seeing someone else, that you were just waiting for the right time to tell her. That's why she felt justified in seeking comfort elsewhere. The air left my lungs again, but this time it was different. This wasn't just betrayal. It was a profound, chilling manipulation. She had lied to him too. Not just about me, but about us. She had used my supposed infidelity as a shield, a justification for her own actions. "She told you I was seeing someone else?" I whispered, the words barely audible. He nodded, his gaze unwavering. "She did. She said you were seeing an old college flame, that you'd been secretive for months. She even showed me texts," she said, "that proved it. Though now, looking back, I realize they were probably fake, or taken out of context." He ran a hand through, his hair, his face etched with a dawning horror. "Oh God, David, she played us both." The realization hit me with the force of a tidal wave. Sarah wasn't just having an affair. She was a master manipulator, orchestrating a complex web of lies to control both of us. The image of her, my gentle, loving Sarah, shattered into a million sharp fragments. The grief I felt for the loss of our marriage was now compounded by a chilling understanding of her true nature. She hadn't just broken my heart. She had systematically dismantled my reality. "The business trips," I muttered, more to myself than to Daniel. "The late nights, all of it. She told me she was working on a big project." Daniel's face was pale. "She told me she was going away to clear her head, to think about her future, to get space from you." He paused, his voice barely a whisper. "She even hinted that you had a temper, that she was afraid of your reaction if she confronted you about leaving." The audacity of it. The sheer, calculated cruelty. She had painted me as the villain to him, as the cause of her supposed unhappiness, the reason she needed solace in another man's arms. And she had painted herself as the victim, the heartbroken wife trapped in a dying marriage. A strange calmness settled over me, replacing the storm of emotion. It was the clarity that comes after the most devastating revelation. I was no longer just a cuckolded husband. I was a pawn in her elaborate game. And so was Daniel. We were both victims of her deceit, albeit in different ways. "So," I said, my voice surprisingly level, "she used you to get what she wanted, and she used me to justify it." Daniel nodded slowly, his eyes filled with a shared understanding, a bleak camaraderie born of mutual betrayal. "I feel sick, David. I genuinely believed I was helping her, that I was offering comfort to a woman in distress. I never, not for a second, thought she was lying to me about you." He buried his face in his hands. "She's a sociopath." The word hung in the air, heavy with its implications. A sociopath. It sounded extreme, melodramatic even. But as I replayed months of interactions in my mind, her evasiveness, her seemingly effortless lies, the way she could switch from coldness to charm in an instant, the word began to fit, like a dark, unsettling puzzle piece. This wasn't just about a broken marriage anymore. This was about a fundamental flaw in her character, a willingness to exploit and manipulate for her own ends. I felt a cold knot of dread in my stomach as I considered what else she might have lied about, what other secrets she might have woven into the fabric of our life. Was our entire relationship built on a foundation of falsehoods? "What do we do?" Daniel asked, looking up, his eyes bloodshot. The question hung in the air. For a moment, a wild, vengeful thought flickered through my mind. Expose her, ruin her, make her pay. But then, a more pragmatic, perhaps even enlightened thought took root. Revenge, while tempting, would only prolong the agony. What I needed was to extract myself from her web, to reclaim my life. "We expose her to herself, Daniel," I said, a new resolve hardening my voice. "Not to the world. We don't owe her that kind of drama. We simply walk away. And we make sure she knows we know." Daniel looked at me, a flicker of surprise in his eyes, perhaps expecting anger, vitriol. Instead, he saw a man who was no longer just hurt, but profoundly disappointed, and strangely clear-headed. "She doesn't deserve our energy," I continued, the words coming easily now. "She doesn't deserve our pain. We gather our evidence, we confront her with the truth, and then we sever all ties. Completely. No lingering resentment, no desperate pleas, no messy fights. Just an end. The turning point wasn't just discovering Sarah's affair. It was the chilling realization of her calculated deceit, the sheer depth of her manipulation. It stripped away not just my love for her, but also my lingering pity. I was no longer the victim of a simple betrayal. I was the survivor of a complex psychological game. And with that understanding came a strange sense of empowerment. I wouldn't just recover. I would rise above it. I went home that day, not with a heavy heart, but with a quiet, determined resolve. I spent the next few days methodically gathering evidence, suspicious texts, inconsistencies in her stories, the subtle shifts in her behavior that now screamed manipulation rather than mere distance. It was like peeling back layers of an onion, each layer revealing a new, more pungent truth. When I finally confronted Sarah, Daniel by my side, the scene was devoid of the theatrical drama I might have once imagined. There were no raised voices, no tears from me, only a cold, hard truth laid bare. "We know, Sarah," I said, my voice calm, almost detached. "We know everything. About your lies to me, and your lies to Daniel. About the stories you spun, the justifications you created, the games you played." Her face, usually so composed, crumbled. The color drained from her cheeks, and her eyes, usually so expressive, darted between Daniel and me, a flicker of panic in their depths. She opened her mouth to speak, to deny, to deflect, but no sound came out. She was trapped, caught in her own elaborate web. Daniel then, calmly, and without emotion, laid out the details of her deceit, the false narratives she had fed him, the twisted version of our marriage she had presented. He didn't accuse. He simply stated the facts as he now understood them. Sarah stood there, silent, defeated. The mask had finally fallen. There was no more pretense, no more charm, no more victimhood. Only the stark reality of a woman caught in her own tangled lies. "I want a divorce, Sarah," I stated, the words firm and clear. "And Daniel, I think it's best we don't see each other for a while. We both need time to heal, to process this. Separately." Daniel nodded, his face etched with sorrow and understanding. He was hurt, too, profoundly so. We were two men, strangers, in a way, united by the bitter truth of a woman's calculated cruelty. The process that followed was difficult, but strangely liberating. The divorce was swift, fueled by her undeniable guilt and my unwavering resolve. I moved out of the bungalow, leaving behind the ghost of a life that was never truly what it seemed. I started fresh, in a new apartment, with a new perspective. The scars remain, of course. The ache of betrayal, the sting of humiliation, the unsettling knowledge that someone I loved so deeply could be capable of such deception. But with time, the pain began to fade, replaced by a quiet strength. I learned to trust my instincts again, to value authenticity, to recognize the subtle cues of manipulation. I reconnected with old friends, pursued hobbies I had neglected, and slowly, painstakingly, rebuilt my sense of self. The experience, devastating as it was, became a crucible, burning away the illusions and leaving behind a stronger, more resilient version of myself. I realized that the true tragedy wouldn't have been the affair itself, but remaining trapped in a relationship built on such an elaborate and cruel foundation of lies. The greatest empowerment came from understanding the full scope of her deception, and choosing, decisively, to walk away. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for your time. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe. It truly helps the channel. Click the video on screen,